Howdy folks, hope you're all doing well today. And in this video I'm going to be talking a little bit about the back to school season and how to help students that are on the spectrum and how to help them get through school. And I'm going to be talking to parents and teachers. So we're breaking this down into two sections. One section is for parents and the other section is for teachers, or I guess it could even be for staff, principals, and anyone who works in a school. So that's what we're going to be doing. So first we'll start with the parents. So when I was going to school, and of course this was back in 2012, the last time I was in school, so it's been over 10 years. And I'm sure things have changed a lot now, of course. It's been over a decade, so of course I'm sure things in school have changed. So, you know, I'm just trying to help as best I can. I don't know if some of this stuff could work or not. But this is just my advice from someone who has autism that went through school and had a hard time and also had some good times. And I just want to help as many people on the spectrum as I can have a better school experience than I did. So for the parents, I'm going to start with give your students, your kids, some extra time in the morning. Now, sometimes I know it can be tough, getting up to go to school. I know for me it was always hard. My dad would always have to wake me up and, having to have the light turn on, especially since I'm sensitive to light. It wasn't very fun for me, but, what I would suggest is give your child some extra time on certain days if it's really tough, because for me it was always just so hard to get up, to get walking, to have any kind of energy. I hardly ever had breakfast. And it was just very stressful. And sometimes my dad would actually, let me take a day off or two. That was always really nice because, some days you just need it, I know some of the teachers who might be watching might not agree with this because you might say, oh, you shouldn't skip on your education. But honestly, and this is coming, me personally, but I think having a day off every now and then is actually something that could be very beneficial, because that's what my dad would do for me. If I was having a really stressful time, he would just let me have a day off, and it really helped a lot. And so that's what I would recommend. If you have to get to school a little bit later, at the end of the day, at least in my opinion, I think what's more important is that the student, the person is more comfortable and more, less stressed out than more stressed. Even if it means you have to be a little late, even if it means you have to skip a day every now and then, I think that's more important, because your mental health, that person's, the student's mental health is more important than, if they didn't get to hear about, an algebra thing or something, like, obviously your education's important. I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm saying that, your mental sanity, your mental health is more important. That's what you really need to work on. And I had a hard time, so I had to have a couple days off, and it did help me a lot, so that's what I would definitely recommend. Another thing I would recommend is, for parents to also let your kids play video games, to play, to go on the computer, and this helped me tremendously, because when I was in school, I was very depressed. I was having a lot of problems, and I'm not going to go into them all. There was a lot of problems at home, but of course I'm not going to get into all that. There's, it's private stuff, but, I've always played Grand Theft Auto 4, Red Dead Redemption, and Call of Duty. Those are my 3 games that I played back then. I still play them now, but they've helped me so much when I was going through all that stress, because I was able to meet friends, have fun, and take my mind off the stress of reality. And so it helped me so much. So I would highly recommend letting your kids play video games. Now, of course, when it comes to the violent games, it depends on your parenting. If you want, younger kids to play them or not, that's up to you. But for me, when I was a teenager, it helped me so much. I can't say enough. I could talk all day about how much it helped me. So I would recommend letting them play. Yeah, that helped me so much. For homework, I hated homework. I don't know how much homework is given now, but, I definitely hope that the parents would help the students do with homework, because, I always had so many troubles with the homework, and it was just so crazy. Like, my classes were algebra and chemistry. Even my parents couldn't help me with that, and it's just crazy. Like, you have to get a tutor and stuff. It's definitely hard for sure. So But that would pretty much be my advice to the parents. Just, just help them when they need it. If they're saying that they're having a hard time, they need a day off, you should give it to them if it's allowed. I don't know how things are nowadays, but that's just what I would recommend, because that's what helped me. So for teachers, I would recommend to start off, the biggest thing I would say is I wish that the teachers would have helped me with chasing my dreams. And when I say that, I mean, my dream, the thing that I'm best at, the thing that I like the most is public speaking, announcing. And I'm sure some of you watching might know this. Some of you who might be new to this channel watching this, if you don't know, I'm actually a public speaker. I'm an announcer, and that's what I'm good at. That's what I specialize in. And when I was in school, there was only one time I actually got to do some public speaking, but for the most part, every time I would try to get involved in that stuff, I'd always be shut down. They'd always say no, and it was always such a disappointment. And I feel like, or should I say, I always wonder where I would be today if my teachers, the staff, or the principals, or any of these people, if they would have said, you know what, yeah, we will let you, we'll let you make an announcement on the PA system, because I would ask that sometimes, and they'd always say no, and it's just so upsetting, because I always wonder where I could be now if I would have gotten into that stuff, over 10 years ago. I only got into it about 7-ish years ago, 8 years ago, but, who knows where I could have been after high school, where I could be if I went to college. I don't know, but I only got into it when I was, a lot older, and it's just a shame. And I just really wish any teachers or staff, principals, anyone watching, I really want you to help these people, these students, to follow their dreams. If they say, oh, hey, can I make an announcement on the intercom? As long as it's an appropriate announcement, of course, you'd have to make sure what they're going to say. You have to write it down. But if they say, yeah, can I make an announcement? You should say, yeah, and let them do what they're interested in. Let them chase their dreams and get some experience into what they're interested in, as long as it's, if it's within the school rules, of course. But I'm saying, like, if they have a special interest, like my special interest is microphones and public speaking, but obviously not everyone's going to have that. But if they have a special interest that's in something else, and as long as it's within the school rules, you should let them, even if it's not something that's normally, like, it might, obviously, letting a student talk on the intercom might not be a normal thing, but it's harmless. It's helpful, It lets them do something they'd be good at, And like I said, I'm just using myself as an example. I don't know, it depends on whatever the other students are interested in. But that's what I really would wish that I could have done. That really would have helped me all that time ago, Another thing I really want to recommend is never yell at a student or at a student on the spectrum, because that can cause a lot of trauma. In fact, I was yelled at by a teacher, and it was just because I had written an essay, because he had us write an essay, and I guess I didn't write it the way he wanted it to be, and so he yelled at me, or I tried to ask him what was wrong with it, and then he started yelling at me. And that, you might say, oh, being yelled at is not a big deal, but being yelled at by a teacher, especially at the time, I was pretty fragile, because as I was saying before, I was going through a lot of trauma at home. Like, there was a lot of bad stuff. I was in a very dark place at the time. So having a teacher yell at me in front of the whole class over nothing, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't yell at him. I didn't cause any problems. I was just asking him what was wrong with my essay, or why he, excuse me, why he didn't like my essay. And that upset me so much, because here's a guy who's supposed to be our role model, a guy that we're supposed to look up to, and he's here yelling at me over something so minor. It's pathetic. So, and the sad thing is, I actually liked that teacher before he yelled at me. He was one of my favorite teachers. I liked him a lot. And up until that day, he was one of my favorites. But then all of a sudden, he starts yelling at me. I'm like, I hated him. I was pissed off at him. It was a really rough time in my life. So I would never, ever yell at an autistic student, because that just, it's not a good thing. It can cause a lot of trauma. So that's definitely what I would recommend. Another thing I would recommend is, if one of your, students on the spectrum is having a bad day and not talking very much, don't force them to talk. Because there was one day I was having a really bad day, and one of my teachers noticed that I was upset, and he tried to ask what was wrong, and I just ignored him, and he got upset. He didn't yell at me, but he was, I could tell in his voice that he wasn't very happy that I ignored him. And I guess, obviously, that might seem rude in a way by ignoring people. I've been told that all the time, by not talking to people, is rude to people. But to me, I wasn't trying to be rude. I just wasn't in a good day. Or, I mean, excuse me, in a good mood. And, sorry about that. But yeah, I just wasn't in a good mood, and I just couldn't talk, And so I just had to walk away. So if one of your students just doesn't want to talk, unless it's an emergency, which, in my case it wasn't, then just let them walk off, let them, cool off. They might come back to you at another time and say, hey, this was a bad time, sorry for not talking to that day or whatever, then just give them some space is what I would recommend. Because, when you're in high school, it's really stressful. At least it is for someone on the spectrum, and I'm guessing even for neurotypicals, it's still stressful. But yeah, that's one of the big things I'd recommend. Another thing I want to recommend is when you have a student, on the spectrum that's having a panic attack and really having a hard time, don't just ignore them. Because there was another time when I was in chemistry class and I just broke down. Like, I was trying to learn and everything, but my mind just could not compute it. It couldn't work. And so I just broke down, and I just sat in the corner just trying to calm myself down or trying to not be stressed out. And it was a whole classroom full of people, the students, the teachers. Not one person offered help. Not one person wanted to at least try to talk to me. Now, that would be a time I would want to talk to someone. If someone would come up to me and say, oh, hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? I mean, in situations like the two I just mentioned, you can at least try to talk to the person. If they don't respond, then that's, of their own volition. They can, walk away, and that's, if they're not in the mood to talk. But in that situation, I would have been more than happy to have someone, a teacher, even a student, to say, hey, what's wrong? You need help? You need assistance? You need to go to the nurse or whatever? Like, if I could have had some help like that, that would have been great. I would have really appreciated that. But no one came to me. No one tried to help me. And that really hurt very much, the fact that no one seemed to care. And eventually I just had to deal with it on my own and try to just calmly breathe and try to, deal with it on my own, because I couldn't rely on anyone else to help me. So for teachers, staff, anyone, if you see someone like that in the corner just, broken down like that, then I highly recommend you to at least try to talk to them. If they still don't want to talk, then, then you can just walk away and say, well, then that's their choice. But at least if you try to talk and just say, hey, do you need help? Do you want to talk? Whatever, then that would be great. At least I could have used it that day. Excuse me. So now I want to go into some things that were actually good, because it wasn't all bad, but I do want to go into some teachers that actually did an amazing job. And this is what I want you teachers out there and staff to copy this behavior. So first off, I was in chorus class, and that was one of my favorite classes, I should say. And so, I loved to sing, I loved music and stuff, and so it was always a nice class to get to listen to music and to sing with people and stuff. That was a lot of fun. And one of the cool things was, because we used to have concerts every few months, and I was able to announce, they let me get to announce a song. Like, basically before we started singing a song, they would have one of the students come up to the microphone and basically describe the song, say the name of the song, describe it. And so they let me do that a couple times for the times that I was in the the times that I was in the chorus. So that was a lot of fun. I got to do it. In fact, they actually had people audition for it. And surprise, surprise, Puzzle Joe, the guy who's great at talking on microphones and public speaking, got the position. I did the audition, and I passed with flying colors. And then I went back the next day when she posted the results of who gets to do it, and voila, there was my name. I was so excited, and my parents came to watch. They were happy, and even everyone I knew told me that I was the best one of all the ones who spoke. And I'm not trying to brag here. Obviously, I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound mean or anything, but I I do kind of, when I went back and watched the video, I have to agree, I think I did do the best. You know, nothing against the other students. You know, they all still did a good job, but I think that was when I realized that I actually had talent when it comes to public speaking. So that was a really cool thing. Another thing I want to mention is I had a teacher who actually, because lunch for me was really stressful. You know, it was loud, it was bright, it was just so much noise, so much, you can't imagine what it's like to have, you know, be in a cafeteria, a huge cafeteria, and have to deal with that loud noise. So one of my teachers, I know he was a history teacher, and he also taught, I think, economics, and I can't remember all of it, but government. Yeah, he taught government too. So I think he was my favorite teachers. He was able to let me have lunch with him, and we would sit and talk and eat lunch, just me and him. And that was awesome. We just talk about history. That was back when I was huge into Civil War. I'd say I still am for the most part, but I was, really interested in it. We talk about that and stuff, and it was just so nice to just get to have lunch in a quiet room and away from all the loud noise and the claustrophobia. It was perfect. So if you have a teacher like that, or, if your students have a teacher like that, I'd highly recommend asking your teacher if they would let you eat lunch with them. It doesn't hurt to ask, because it really helped me a lot, because I hated doing lunch in the cafeteria. It was terrible. And the last thing I would recommend is getting involved with a social group. Now, I can't remember the name of this group, but I remember I was in a group, and it was for other kids with, I don't know if they were all autistic, but they were all kids with, or, students with, like, learning disabilities and stuff. They were all, like, special ed kids is what I should say, yeah. So we would all meet once a week, and she wasn't a teacher, she was like one of the counselors, and she hosted this group where we would all just sit and talk about our life and about, whatever's going on. And, it would basically give us like a half hour just to get to talk and, have a good time. We got to play games, and you'd have candy and stuff. It was a great time. So I would highly recommend to any parents listening to get any of your special ed kids, if they have autism or whatever, to get them involved in some kind of group. Ask the staff, ask, anyone at the school, the teachers, if there's a group like that. I went to the Trenton High School, so, I don't know what it's like at the other schools, but if there's, I would highly recommend asking to get them involved in it. And the best part was that this group was taking place during my least favorite class, which was algebra. So I was always so happy to get through a whole, skip through most of the class. It was awesome. And on days, every night, every day, I think it was Wednesday, I'd go and I checked to see if the counselor was there in her office. And if she wasn't there, I was always so disappointed, because I was like, oh no, that means I'm not going to get to have group today. And I was always like, oh, I had to deal with algebra again. I hated that. So yeah, I would highly recommend trying to get into something like that if that's available in your school. And lastly, I just want to, just say to treat your students with autism with respect. Let them, chase their dreams, and just help them like that, Get them started in that kind of stuff. Even if it's something unorthodox, just try to help them, try to be patient with them, and that's all you could do, and do your best. So thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you'd like, and let me know what you thought of the video, if any of it helps. And if you have any questions, because I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that I missed that I could have talked about. So if you have any questions, or if anything, feel free to leave a comment or anything. I'd really appreciate it. So thanks again for watching. I hope it helps, and if it does help, please let me know. It would be nice to know if any of my advice worked out. So until next time, I'm the Aspie Cowboy, or Puzzle Joe, and hope you all have a great day. Bye.